Hello students, welcome to Distinction Learning Platform. In this video, we'll be looking at bonding in chemistry. Alright? Now, before we begin these lessons, make sure that you subscribe, like the video, as well as comment in the comment section. Alright? Let us begin. So what is bonding? Bonding, basically, it is just the chemical combination of atoms to form what we call compounds. So let us write that definition. What are we saying? We are saying bonding is the chemical combination of atoms to form compounds. Okay? Again, what is bonding? Bonding is the chemical combination of atoms to form compounds. But we need to highlight most important words from there. So we've talked about chemical combination of what? Atoms as well as compounds. So we need to understand what it means when you say atoms and what it means compound. Because if you understand the different types of compound, it will tell us also the different types of bonding. Alright? Now, another important terminology that you need to understand is chemical combination, because there are two important combinations that we need to understand. There is what we call physical combination and there is what we call chemical combination. So if you talk about chemical combination, we're talking about the combination of atoms. But if you talk about the combination of mixtures, like if you get sand and water, that is what we call physical combination. We are not talking about the combination of atoms in terms of physical combination, okay? So what I simply mean is that if the moment we just see a chemical combination, we are talking about atoms combining together. Physical combination, we are talking about mixtures or formation of mixtures like sand and water, all right? Now, let us understand what we mean if you talk about atom, because this is the new word that we need to understand. What is an atom? An atom, we know that it is the smallest particle of an element that takes part in a chemical reaction. We all know that any matter in the world or any substance in the world, they are going to contain atoms. And atoms, these are the smallest particles that are always taking part in all the chemical reactions, okay? Very simple definition for atoms. So, simply terms, we're saying smallest particle. So, an atom is a what? Smallest particle of an element. Particle of an element. Okay? So what is an atom? An atom is the smallest particle of an element, and it's always what going to involve itself in what? Chemical reactions. Okay, that's what we call an atom. Now, the most important thing is talking about compounds. Okay, the most important thing that we need to understand is talking about what? Compound. What it means. Why talking about compounds? It is because compounds are the ones that are going to tell us the type of what? Bonding. Now, what are compounds? What are compounds? What are compounds? So compounds, basically, these are substances that are produced when two or more atoms combine. Okay? Again, what are compounds? So we are saying compounds are produced when what? So let us use red for this one. Are produced when two or more atoms chemical combine. Okay? So what are compounds? Compounds are produced when two or more atoms combine or chemically combine. That's what we call a compound. A good example that I'm going to give you for a compound is what? Water. So if you look at water, we write water like this. Water is a compound. Why am I saying so? because there are different atoms. There are two or more atoms that are there in this water molecule, which is there is the hydrogen atom and oxygen atom. So there are two atoms, or there are three atoms, because there is two hydrogen and the one oxygen there. And from the definition of compound, we are saying two or more atoms in a certain substance is going to form what we call a compound. Make sure that you understand that. Even if I give you something like this, okay, then I ask you to say, is that a compound? Yes, that is a compound. This is what we call oxygen molecule. Why is this a compound? Because how many oxygen that are here? There are two oxygen atoms. So remember, from the definition, we are starting from 2 or more, mean that's 2, 3, 4 up until it reaches the infinity. Then that compound or that substance that's going to be produced containing 2 or more atoms is what we call a compound. Now, how many types of these compounds that we are talking about? How many types? We've got 2 types of compounds. Okay, how many types? We've got what? 2 types. So types of compound, we've got what? 2 types. Make sure that you understand. We've got 2 types of compounds. We've got what we call ionic compounds. Okay, and molecular compounds. Okay, how many types of compounds do we know? We've got 2 types of compounds. We've got what we call ionic compounds as well as what? Molecular compounds. All right. Now, since we know the 2 types of compound, we need to understand each type of the compound. Why are we saying this is an ionic compound? Why are we saying that this is a molecular compound? Okay, let us look at that. So ionic compound, basically, these are compounds that are produced when a metal and a non-metal combine. Okay, so what are we saying? We are saying ionic compound, they can only exist when a metal and a non-metal atom combine. So we're saying, here we're saying metal and non-metal atoms combines. Okay, these are the compounds that are going to be produced when a metal and a non-metal atoms combine. Good example that I can give for this one. So let us make space for this one. Okay, so good example that I can give for that one is what? Good example that I can give, e.g. okay, good example that I can give for ionic compound where you're going to see a metal and a non-metal is this one. So what if I give you something like potassium oxide? Okay, so potassium oxide, this is K2, potassium oxide. Okay, that is what we call potassium oxide. What type of a compound is this one? We're going to say potassium oxide is what? An ionic compound. Why? Because potassium is a metal, oxygen is a non-metal. Remember from the definition we said metal and non-metal, they have to be there. Okay, that's the first good example. What about another one? As long as you're able to identify the metal and the non-metal in a certain compound, you're going to call it ionic compound. So what if I get something like this, calcium, then maybe with that one, calcium carbonate. What type of a compound is that one? That is what we call an ionic compound. Why? Because if you look at calcium, this is a metal, carbon is a non-metal, as well as oxygen is a non-metal. So as long as you've got what? Non-metals and a metal, then what we are going to have is what we call an ionic compound. Okay, let's go to the last one, which is what we said now we need to talk about, which is the molecular compounds. we need to understand how molecular compounds differ from what? Ionic compound. How are they going to differ from one another? We need to understand this one. Here we said metal. Now, for molecular compound, we are going to say non-metals. Okay? So a non-metal atoms combines with one another. Okay? So what we are saying is that for you to have a molecular compound, it simply means that we are going to have non-metal atoms combined with one another. So mean that if you have one non-metal atoms, then they combine with one another, they are going to form what we call molecular compound. So on molecular compound, you don't have to see a metal. You only have to see what? Non-metals. So good example that I can give for this one is what? Good example that I can give, e.g. Okay, good example that I can give is, maybe what if I give you something like this? Okay, this one. Is that an ionic compound or a molecular compound? We are going to say this is a molecular compound. Why? Because here there is nitrogen and the oxygen. Nitrogen is a non-metal, oxygen is a non-metal. So this is what we call a molecular compound. Okay? What else? What about this one, the common gas, which is carbon dioxide? What about that one? Carbon dioxide is also a molecular compound. Why? Because it is formed due to what? Carbon and oxygen. Carbon is a non-metal. Okay, oxygen is what? A non-metal. So that is what we call a molecular compound. Another one, the last one, which is this one. What about this one? That one, that's what we call ammonia. Again, in ammonia, there is what? Nitrogen and hydrogen combined together. So those are non-metals as well. And that is going to form what we call a molecular compound. Alright? Now, after learning all these things, we need to understand now bonding. Okay? We need to understand bonding now. Since we know, how many types of bonding do we have to know? Okay? So bonding is going to happen when we have what? Atoms of different molecules forming what? Compounds. Okay? So atoms of different substances, they are coming together or combining together to form what we call compound. Compound either ionic compound or molecular compound. So which simply means that we are going to have the types of bonding. So type C of bonding. Type C of bonding. Okay? So types of bonding. So technically, we are going to have 3 types of bonding. Okay? We are going to have how many? 3 types of bonding. We are going to have 3 types of bonding. The first one is what we call, so let us write it here. The first one is what we call, the first one is ionic bonding. Okay? The first one is what we call ionic bonding. Okay? That's the first one. And the second one we talk about molecular bonding. That's from the word molecular bonding. Okay? So ionic bonding, this is a type of bonding where it's going to exist between what? A metal and a non-metal atom. So make sure that you understand. That's why this compound, we are calling them ionic compound, because a metal and a non-metal were combining with one another. If that happens, that type of bonding that is existing between metals and non-metals, basically that's what we call ionic bonding. So what is ionic bonding? Ionic bonding, we are saying, this is a type of bonding where non-metals and metals atoms chemically combine. Okay, chemically combine. That's what we call ionic bonding. So ionic bonding is a type of bonding where non-metal and the metal atoms chemically combines. That's what we call ionic bonding. But we'll talk about ionic bondings in detail so that we see what happens. Because in ionic bonding, you find out to say ionic bonding, a metal is going to start losing electrons so that now the non-metal can start gaining electrons. So we'll look at that in details in the next video. Alright? So but all in all, what we need just to understand right now is that ionic bonding is a type of bonding that's going to exist between non-metals and what? Metals. That's what we need to understand for right now. Okay? And good example of atoms or good example of ionic bonding or good example of elements or atoms that are going to show ionic bonding is what? These elements that I talked about. Potassium oxide, calcium carbonate, as long as there is what? As long as there is a metal and a non-metal that is there, then ionic bonding is going to exist. Okay? Just to show you what we are simply saying is that if you have calcium, okay, which is a metal, and you have maybe a non-metal which is oxygen, which is the famous one, if these two come together, meaning that coming together is what we call bonding. Okay, coming together, this calcium and oxygen, if they are coming together, this is what we call bonding to form what? Calcium oxide, which is a product or which is a compound. Okay, this is what we call bonding. Now, if this bonding is happening between a non-metal and a metal, and this type of bonding, we're going to say this is what we call ionic bonding. Hopefully that is clear now. So now let us proceed to another type of bonding. Okay, another type of bonding. Okay, another type of bonding, we call it molecular bonding. Okay, we call it molecular bonding. Just from the word molecular compounds, now we're going to have molecular bonding. Molecular bonding. Okay, so now here I'm going to put in brackets because others, they are not familiar with molecular bonding. It has also another name which we call covalent bonding. So I'm going to put it here. So the other name for molecular bonding, it is what we call covalent bonding. This is the other name for this one. What about ionic bonding? Ionic bonding, it also has another name, okay, which is what we call electrovalent bonding. Okay, electrovalent bonding. So instead of just using electrovalent bonding, just use the simple term which is ionic bonding, okay? Instead of using electrovalent. So molecular bonding or covalent bonding, again, here we're going to say now where, so here is a type of bonding now, where, let's us use simple English. We're going to say molecular bonding exists only in non-metals or only among non-metal atoms. Okay, that's what we call molecular bonding. As you can see, so if molecular bonding is going to happen, we're going to have molecular compound. So again, if I get another molecule, maybe anything, I get nitrogen here and I get oxygen, then they try to come together to form this nitrogen dioxide, this one. As long as they are coming together, they are forming what we call bonding. Okay, so as long as oxygen and nitrogen, they are coming together to form this part, then that's what we call bonding. Okay, now what is this type of bonding where oxygen and nitrogen coming together? Oxygen is a non-metal, nitrogen is a non-metal. If they come together, they are going to form this molecular compound. What type of bonding is this? Molecular bonding. But another type of bonding that exists, we need to understand another one, because I didn't talk about the compound that can be formed because of this bonding that I'm going to talk about now. Okay? So which is this one? What is this one? We call it metallic bonding. Okay, we call it what? Metallic bonding. So metallic bonding now is going to exist among, so let us use only again, only among metals. Okay, metal atoms only. Metal atoms. Let's just say metal atoms like that. Okay. So as you can see, metallic bonding also is there. So metallic bonding, just from the word metallic, means that metal. So it's a type of bonding that's going to exist only among metal atoms. What do I mean? So what do I mean by this? Now, what I mean by this is that if you have a metal like potassium, you are trying to combine potassium with another metal, like maybe you get another metal like calcium, like that. You are trying to combine these two elements to form a certain like compound, but like this one, just trying to physically mix this type of what? This type of metals. Okay, so mean that if you are combining a metal with another metal, basically that's what we call metallic what? Bonding. Okay, make sure that you understand about this. So now this now gives us the basic introduction to bonding. Make sure that you know the basic introduction to bonding. Now in the next video we'll talk about ionic bonding in details, and the other video will talk about molecular bonding in details, and the other video for metallic bonding as well. Okay, now this is where we end from. All the best until next time.